So hi, today we've got Anna from EAL Inclusive with us, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the work that she has been doing and hopefully give us a little bit of advice on how we can support EAL learners in our schools. So welcome, Anna.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, if we, it's quite all right. We'll start straight away. I'll just ask how you came to the world of EAL and what's that journey look like for you?
Okay, well, I was just about to say it's nice to reconnect because obviously we, know each other from the past, from the good old days at Chorlton High School in Manchester. So, yeah, funny you say that. The EAL kind of started at Chorlton High School, where I was very fortunate to be given the position with the EAL department. Obviously, we worked together in the English department, but to lead the EAL department through, I guess, a transition stage where there was some things that were in place, but we were, as a school, moving more towards away from the kind of intervention kids in a room learning English, doing intervention, to this whole school approach. And I remember, Andy, the head teacher, sending myself and Amy on some training for inference training. And he was like, look, we need to build this common language. We need to build this whole school approach. And something just clicked with that, when a kind of light bulb moment kind of opens up where you're like, oh my goodness, yeah, if we can be teaching these kind of, there were primary level reading skills that we were learning about.
Yeah.
If we can build this into our EAL curriculum and we can expand students' reading skills, reading in their home language, reading in English, we can then increase their vocabulary. And, I'm not going to lie, at that point, I was new to the EAL kind of world. So I was just kind of trying to absorb anything that I could in terms of good practice. And we were like, okay, let's, create this whole school, work towards this whole school approach where we can make sure that this language for learning isn't just happening in the intervention classroom, but it's happening across the curriculum as well. And that's where we started with the common language. And that's where we started looking at this idea of gold and silver students as well. So the gold and silver element that the school was already using for their 5 A-star to C GCSE students and their targets. Thinking about how we could apply this model of identifying which students had their highest level of need and which students had kind of more of an intermediate level of need, and how we can communicate that very clearly to all staff so that we've got this whole school consistent approach to supporting students with their language for learning. So yeah, like you, I kind of after Chorlton, went abroad, got to enjoy the international lifestyle for a few years, and took that idea with me to my school in Malaysia. So I worked at the British International School in Kuala Lumpur, and again introduced this idea of gold and silver students, really to make it as easy as possible for all staff to be on board. Like, we know how difficult it is when you're just managing your own subject, and you're teaching and learning, and you're marking and making sure that you're delivering really good lessons and that students are getting the feedback really in a really timely way, and you've got your tutor group. So there's so much to manage as kind of just a subject teacher, that actually when you've got someone saying, oh, actually, can you do bring this into the curriculum, can you add this on to your lessons, sometimes it feels like a lot. And actually what I found in Malaysia and obviously in Chorlton, the kind of more straightforward we can make it for everybody, the better the differentiation is going to be. So people sometimes feel a bit like, oh, English isn't my subject, or I'm not an EAL teacher. If we strip it back and we make it as straightforward as possible, this kind of giving students language for learning, we've got a much greater chance of it happening more consistently and to a more effective degree as well. So then left Malaysia, came back, and that's where kind of EAL Inclusive has been born, where it's taking these ideas and helping the international schools and schools in the UK to tighten up the processes that they have for whole school language for learning, to make sure that it's consistent, that it's lived and breathed through all members of staff, and that actually it's used to make sure all students make exceptional progress.
Yeah, love that. Really, really important, the whole school approach to that. I just want to come back to the gold and silver stars. So could you just tell me how did they work? What are those two different levels again?
So we would identify, obviously, all schools will identify their cohort of EAL students who need possibly withdrawal from the curriculum or some kind of additional support, whether it's in class or somebody working with them to help them develop their English for learning. So these are your gold students, anyone that requires additional support. And I know some international schools sometimes charge for their EAL additional lessons. So again, in Malaysia, it made it really clear cut, because it was, it's quite tricky sometimes, saying like, well, these students need additional support. For those parents, that comes with an additional cost. So it's got to be, again, for parents, really clear and really transparent what pathway their child is on. So your gold students are your students who come in who are new to English, who are early acquisition. And we will then obviously support them, give them the additional intervention lessons. And then when they're ready to transition off the programme, they will do an exit assessment that enables us to identify if they've now kind of got sufficient language for learning to be more competent, and then they will become a silver student. And that's because we don't want students to have all this intensive additional support where they're getting loads of help with their language for learning, and then okay, they pass a test, all right, okay, great, off you go, and then actually that support finishes for them. And we know that it's got to be embedded, that language is so complex, and actually learning languages as babies takes us a long amount of time, and it's layered on. So in order to make sure that it's not just kind of okay, right, finish here, off you go, kind of crack on, get your your GCSEs and all the best, making sure that there's a really clear pathway. And again, kind of echoing back to what we were saying before, making it really clear for teachers. So these are your silver students. These students will require the following provision. They will require their language for learning being sent home. They will require kind of someone checking in on a weekly or monthly basis to kind of check how confident they're feeling with their different subjects. They will need their progress in other subjects, monitoring and kind of, somebody that's working with them and kind of keeping an eye on their progress from a language learning perspective as well. So, so that's where it's come from. And it's kind of, I feel like it makes it really clear and hopefully helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what you're talking about is so important with that, the silver students, the ones that I like the word transition. I always use the word graduated, and I think transition is a nicer term to sort of use there, because it is that ongoing process. Mm-hmm. So you've a lot of that you're carrying through into your consultancy work, and you're working with schools internationally as well as in the UK at the moment.
So international, obviously with this kind of more of the consultancy, and with the UK, obviously I know with a lot of UK schools, budgets are quite tight at the moment, aren't they? So what I'm trying to do is create opportunities. So for schools in the UK who might be worried about their budgets, that's where some of the work that I've been doing with the careers and this kind of creation of resource packages, so that schools in the UK, if they're worried about budgets, can still have access to material that's kind of lower cost, that they can, again, just make it easy for all of their teachers when they're delivering materials to have a differentiated and accessible version.
Fantastic, good, because I did want to ask you about that. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing at the moment with your careers curriculum. So for the past 4 years, I've been a pastoral leader in an international school, and I think I was crying out for materials like yours. So can you tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important that we are creating inclusive materials in that sort of genre?
Yeah, of course. So so it's come about really through a connection that I made. A guy called Brett, who works for he has a company called the Creative Resources, and they have a wealth of PSHE and careers curriculum on their website. And through a conversation with him, he pointed out that people have been asking, it'd be great to have a differentiated version, or something to support EAL or SEND students. And having worked or working also in a special needs provision as well at the moment, I started to think about it and was like, actually, what it boils down to, obviously EAL and SEND are very different kind of areas that we need to provide support for, but actually what makes learning accessible for all students is if they have the language for learning. And so then I kind of started looking at PSHE and careers. And then, you know, when you kind of open the lid and you're like, oh my goodness, there is so much language for learning here. You know, I was thinking about my students at the special needs school. I was thinking about the EAL students at Chorlton and in Malaysia. And I was just like, this, you know, first language English speakers or children without special needs will struggle with some of this vocabulary.
Yeah.
And you know, so actually, if we can provide, number one, opportunities for pre-learning vocabulary, for kind of helping students to learn it either before or during the lesson, to revisit it afterwards, and put in scaffolding that's obviously more specific to kind of specific needs as well, like kind of reducing kind of the writing load in some of these lessons. Actually, that would help a lot of students. And so, you know, when you kind of have this moment where you're like, right, okay, let's see what this would look like. So yeah, so then kind of trialed it with a year 7 PSHE unit, and then yeah, moved on to careers. So I just think, you know, at the moment, if you know, you read the news and, you know, it's quite depressing, isn't it, when it kind of talks about like the economy and kind of prospects for the future. And you just think, oh, do you know what, we've got to make sure that every kid has the tools for them to follow the career path and to like chase their dreams, realize their ambitions, you know. And that's our responsibility, to make sure that the kids in front of us, number one, receive a careers curriculum, but number two, receive one that they understand and that they can engage in, that sparks their motivation and kind of inspires them to you know, reach towards their kind of aspirations. So yeah, and kind of, you know, through that, I am also working on a project with there's a guy called Jamie at My Path, who does a lot of career stuff, and we are just embarking actually on a careers project for UK schools. So starting with schools in the west of England, but that's really exciting. It's a project that we will have ready for kind of early 2023. So yeah, it's going to be exciting to see where that goes. We're trialing it. It's quite an exciting idea that we've come up with together, and yeah, we've got the support of the local authority. So yeah, so schools are located in the west of England. You'll be receiving some resources and hearing from us soon. So yeah, and then the exciting thing is that, you know, there's potential there that if it has the impact that we think it will, that's something that where we can get, again, resources out to schools for free that enable them to provide this differentiated provision for their EAL and SEND students. So yeah, that feels really good, to be able to get stuff into schools for free without, you know, touching their budgets, and, you know, they can keep the heating on for longer, or, you know, and there's difficult decisions being made, aren't there, in schools in relation to budgets and things at the moment. So that's really important to us.
It sounds incredible, Anna. It's so important what you're doing. It's amazing to hear about it. I want to sort of keep on that track, if that's okay, and maybe go into a little bit of the sort of more technical side of it. So your materials for the PSHE curriculums and career curriculum, how do you adapt those materials to be inclusive?
Okay, so I kind of try, first of all, try and put myself in the headspace of a student that I've taught. So I'm thinking about, like I said, special needs students at the school I've been working at, or, you know, EAL students, and I'm looking at, you know, the learning objectives. I'm looking at what we need to cover, and I'm like, okay, what are the barriers here? And I'll kind of identify all of the barriers first of all. So, you know, it might be, 9 times out of 10, it's understanding the keywords that unlock the content there. A lot of the time, you know, in careers and PSHE type lessons, a lot of it is discussion based. With students, you know, there's kind of so many barriers there. You know, if students are new to English and not very confident with speaking, then obviously, you know, we need to kind of facilitate situations in which they can feel more confident to have those discussions. We need to provide speaking frames. We need to provide, you know, we need to give students a nudge with some ideas as well, because actually, you know, the concept could be completely new as well. So it's that idea of kind of sprinkling enough scaffolding in there whilst ensuring that the challenge is still kept high. So the careers curriculum that I've just created is linked up with the creative curriculum, and the objectives are really challenging. And so rather than, you know, decreasing the challenge of the objectives, what I've done is just made the language there more concrete, so that it's really, you know, really concrete language, and the language that's needed is put in there, so that there's, you know, students are given the opportunity to, you know, with the flashcards, they've got the opportunity to kind of learn the vocabulary through the flashcard activities, and the scaffolding is there. And I think one of the key things, which has probably been one of the more labour intensive kind of elements of the package, is, you know, I know from kind of a special needs context, and also, you know, internationally with EAL students, sometimes that mainstream classroom isn't right for every student. And actually sometimes you will have students who will need to leave the classroom, and they might need to work with a teaching assistant outside for sensory needs, you know, for confidence, you know, and if you've got the capacity to do that, I know as a teacher in special school, I need to be able to not lose any time, to be able to have the same learning material available, so that that child can go and learn in an environment that's going to be conducive to their learning, so that they're not losing precious minutes of the lesson, and they're continuing, they're getting that continuity. So the workbook that comes with the lesson PowerPoints follows the lesson. So, you know, if a child has to go, you know, is having a difficult time and kind of wants to work in a different environment, they just pick up where they left off, and they've got everything there so that they can work with a teaching assistant. And obviously, you know, for things like lockdowns or, you know, remote learning, it supports that as well, so students can do the exact same work. And for those students who you know, might have a barrier in terms of their writing, you know, so special needs student might be like, oh, you know, I don't want to write, I don't, you know, I just want to kind of discuss. That's great, you know, that's where the learning happens, isn't it? The discussion and the development of ideas. So I just wanted to reduce the amount of writing as much as possible. So a lot of it, you know, in the workbooks is students filling in the gaps, and it, like I said, it matches to the PowerPoint, so they've got all of their learning in one place. They can revisit it, go back, consolidate vocabulary, expand on different ideas. There's different levels of challenge in there as well, so students, again, they're kind of grasping, can kind of go ahead without, it just gives teachers and students and support staff that little bit more flexibility by having that for them to work together in a really accessible format. To just also to create more independence as well, you know, so that students can, if they're really into something, they can go ahead a little bit and kind of read about something, and maybe kind of like, you know, add to their mind map or go back to something. We want to create that excitement and that motivation in learning, that students feel like they can and want to do that, whilst also still being very much anchored to these very challenging learning objectives as well. So
fantastic. And how can we sort of find out a little bit more about your year 7 resources that you've got ready to go?
The year 7 ones, so I have, if anyone wants to have a look at a unit, feel free, I can send just a unit over for you to have a look at before kind of looking at the rest of them. They're also on YouTube as well. So again, because I wanted to create flexibility, again, from, you know, think about myself in a classroom, I think it's really valuable that if a student does want to or needs to have a different learning environment for sensory needs, or, you know, all the reasons we've discussed, that actually there's the option there of kind of having an audio with the PowerPoint if they need you know, a quiet space. So for a lot of the lessons, I deliver the lessons as an audio, so it's a video that's on YouTube as well, again, you know, just kind of sending home for homework if students want to, you know, kind of prepare themselves for some of the learning. So they are on YouTube as well, so I can share the links with you if you want, and you've got them then, so you can have a look at, I think that all of the year 7 and 11 careers is on YouTube, and the year 7, I think all of it's on YouTube.
Oh, amazing. So we'll put something about that in the comments. I'm really, really interested and love what you're saying about having those the different medias and having all of the resources there for our learners. One of the things that really surprised me a little bit after the sort of lockdowns and home-based learning is how much more our learners at the school was at. Those that were struggling in a mainstream setting, as soon as they had access to all of these materials at any time they wanted and they could dip into it, the progress was amazing. So you know, I think it's certainly something a lot of schools have really seen the benefits of now. So it sounds great.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think I did the first lockdown in Malaysia. And so I kind of saw it from more of an EAL perspective where, yeah, the students who, I mean, were kind of silent students, they might, go through lessons without saying very much. All of a sudden, you were hearing much more from these students because, it's through email, through, talking through Google Meet. So that was amazing. And then, on the flip side, I did the second lockdown at a special needs school. So again, students who don't, some students who don't really speak, who might have speech as a learning need.
Yeah.
I was hearing so much from them at home, and it was amazing. And I was just like, oh, can't we? We almost need kind of a method like this in the classroom, to just to create that flexibility.
Yeah.
There's who are we to there's like one right way of learning, that it's the teacher at the front, delivering the lessons to all of the students who have to listen at that point in time.
Yeah.
So much more going on for students than what we will ever know. And actually, we need flexibility for us to be able to give them flexibility to learn in the optimal environment and time for them. So it's about really being flexible so that we can create that personalized approach for them.
All right. We're probably running out of time a little bit. So, but I do want us to sort of finish with one sentence stem, one prompt for you, Anna.
Okay.
So I just want you to finish this sentence for me. So the most important thing a school can do for their EAL learners is
provide the opportunity for them to learn the language for learning, academic vocabulary, academic language.
Absolutely amazing. And how can sorry, I said one final thing there, Anna, but your response has piqued my interest a little bit. If we're thinking from a leadership perspective, whether middle or senior leadership, how can we bring on board all of the different departments, the non-English departments in supporting that? Or how can we assist them?
How can we assist them? So I think you need somebody leading on it, and you need someone that's committed to it and passionate about it and really believes it in the vision. And I think you need a senior leader who's kind of driving it at that kind of senior level, so that you can make it policy as quickly as possible. So having a senior leader and then working with a member of staff who kind of gets it off the ground. So whether that is somebody brought in externally, whether that's your EAL coordinator, whether it's someone working with your EAL coordinators to kind of hold their hand through that process, because, I'd be lying if I said that, it's a really straightforward thing to do. It's, I kind of trying to do it in Chiltern, in kind of like my third year of teaching or something, I found it really hard. And, it's only through kind of trial and error that you realize actually, okay, there's smarter ways of doing it. There's ways of getting people on board. So kind of, definitely having a senior leader on board, somebody else driving it. And I would say you need to work with departments. So, having that kind of very much handheld approach with the idea that, okay, let's work with the maths department. Okay, so we'll work with the maths department. We'll look at, where language for learning is important for them. Okay, let's look at their GCSE papers. Okay, this is what students need to know to succeed, in maths from a language perspective. Working with the head department. Here's how we feed this into your lessons. This is how we make it really easy for your teachers to deliver this. So kind of doing it in a kind of very supported way with individual departments. And also getting from the department heads at that point in time a list of keywords for every unit for every year group. So once you've got that, you can then build that into your whole school policy, and you can do so much with that. So you can, put it into homework booklets and kind of build it into your intervention program. Like it is a lot of work, and it's, it's easy to kind of get lost in the, we're in such a busy school year, school week, that it's easy for those things to kind of get lost in the kind of day-to-day of school life. But if you kind of collate those words, your EAL department can, fly with them. Like that will make such a big difference to students. And once you've got that in there as a kind of basic, you build on top of that.
Yeah.
But you know then as a senior leader that all of your students are, as a minimum, being supported with learning 10 keywords per unit across the board, and that will have an amazing impact on student well-being, student confidence, and progress.
Fantastic. And I really like what you said there about this is how we can make it easier for your teachers, and I think that's the key for the buy-in, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to give teachers a bad name saying that, teachers are lazy. They're not. Quite the opposite. I know how much people have to do. So you've got to make it as straightforward as possible if you're going to do a whole school approach. Take the take the kind of the workload, the kind of the extra out, because teachers are already pushed to, the point where there's not a lot of wiggle room if any, in most teachers' timetables, let's face it. And I think with the way things are going with budgets, I think, that's going to become even more of a consideration, I think, for schools. So it's kind of looking at where we can be smart with resources.
Yeah, and getting smart at that planning stage. So all of the GCSE or IGCSE papers have a glossary attached to the scheme of work. So the starting point is there. Which units is it in, and that's going to pay dividends.
I mean, if I look at the back of a maths or science GCSE paper, I'm a fluent English speaker, native English speaker, and I look at those words, I'm like, could I use that correctly in the right context? I'm not sure about all of those, because I'm not a scientist, and I haven't done GCSE science for many, many years. So it's something that if you can put that in place, will not just support your EAL and your SEND student, it will help every student.
Yeah.
Every student will improve as a result of doing those things.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So we've mentioned a few different links and things, so I'll pop them into the comments, so that people can connect with you as well, Anna, over on your site and on your individual profile. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's really, really nice hearing just how passionate you are about all of these things, Anna, and the work that you're doing at the moment. As I've said to you a couple of times, I'm really, really impressed with it, and I wish that I'd had access to those resources when I was sort of leading the pastoral aspects of the school.
Oh, thank you. It's been really good to catch up, and really good to, I love to go off on a tangent because I love talking about it so much. So yeah, anytime
yeah. Well, you made it really easy for me. It's what you do is really shone through, and so I'm really, really grateful for that. And yeah, absolutely lovely to see you again and to catch up with you. So we'll talk more in the future, as I want to see how your stuff develops.
Super.